All right, so let's dive into something pretty big that just came out.
Mm-hmm.
The White House's brand new National Security Memorandum on AI.
Okay.
You might be thinking, oh, another memo, great.
Yeah.
But trust me on this one, this is different. This is the Biden-Harris administration laying out for
Okay.
the very first time exactly how they see AI impacting national security
Yeah.
and what they actually plan to do about it.
Yeah.
No sci-fi speculation here.
Okay.
Just straight facts
Yeah.
and real-world implications for all of us, especially those of us in the AI world.
What I find so fascinating about this document is it's just so direct. It doesn't beat around the bush. It comes right out and says, the NSM's fundamental premise is that advances at the frontier of AI will have significant implications for national security and foreign policy in the near future.
Mm,
So that really sets the stage clearly. We're not talking about something in the distant future.
right.
This is about now.
Yeah, that quote
Yeah.
that quote really jumped out at me too. It's like a clear signal that AI is no longer just some kind of theoretical concern for national security.
Right.
It's a very pressing reality. And the memo goes beyond just acknowledging AI's importance, right?
Okay.
It lays out a multi-pronged approach with concrete actions.
Yeah.
And it starts with, quote, U.S. leadership in safe, secure, and trustworthy AI. So how do they plan to actually achieve this?
Well, they're first focusing on bolstering the United States' position in what is essentially the global AI race. Remember the POPTS Act?
Right.
On the surface, it was all about boosting domestic semiconductor manufacturing, right?
Right.
But this memo directly connects that to AI. They're saying, very clearly, advanced AI needs advanced chips, and we need to be in control of that supply chain. We can't be relying on other countries for this.
So it's not just about making more chips. It's really strategic. It's about ensuring that the U.S. has that foundational technology to lead in AI development.
Yeah.
Which makes sense when you think about all the computing power that's needed for things like
Yeah.
large language models and these complex simulations.
Exactly. And the memo goes even further. It directly calls out something that I think is probably on the minds of a lot of AI engineers and researchers out there: economic and technological espionage. The memo says, this NSM makes collection on our competitors' operations against our AI sector a top-tier intelligence priority and directs relevant U.S. government entities to provide AI developers with the timely cybersecurity and counterintelligence information necessary to keep their inventions secure.
So they're basically saying that protecting U.S. AI innovation is a national security imperative.
Yeah.
And they're not just talking about government secrets here, right?
Right.
They're talking about protecting the work being done by companies, universities, researchers, people like you.
Precisely. They view the U.S. AI sector as a target, and they're being proactive about protecting it. And this is where the AI Safety Institute comes in. The memo designates them as kind of the point person, if you will, for the entire industry on this particular issue.
Okay, so we're not just talking about increased security clearances or tighter regulations, right? We're talking about building a direct line of communication between the AI development community and the intelligence community. Why is that so important?
Well, because it's about more than just security protocols. It's about having this shared understanding of the technology, the risks, and the potential threats. The AI Safety Institute is actually staffed with technical experts. They understand what's happening in the AI world,
Right.
and they can communicate that to the intelligence community.
It's like they're trying to build a bridge between two worlds that historically haven't spoken the same language.
Yeah.
That's pretty significant, especially when you think about the complexity of AI
Yeah,
and how rapidly it's evolving.
absolutely. And they're not stopping there. The memo also emphasizes the need for diverse participation in AI research. They're not just relying on the big tech companies.
Right.
They're looking to universities, civil society, small businesses.
That makes sense. AI is too complex and impactful to be controlled by just a small group of players.
Mm-hmm.
And this is where that national AI research resource comes into play, right?
Exactly. The memo says the NSM doubles down on the National AI Research Resource to ensure that researchers at universities, from civil society, and in small businesses can conduct technically meaningful AI research. So this is about leveling the playing field and giving more researchers access to the resources they need to be able to contribute to AI innovation.
So they're investing in infrastructure, in talent, and making sure the U.S. has this, the broadest possible base of expertise in AI. It sounds like they're trying to build a national AI ecosystem, not just rely on a handful of big companies.
That's exactly right. They're recognizing that the future of AI depends on fostering innovation across the board, from the fundamental research all the way to commercial applications.
And all of this, the focus on U.S. leadership, the protection of intellectual property, the emphasis on diverse research. It's all part of building a strong foundation for national security in this age of AI.
Yes, but it's not just about dominance, it's about responsible development. The memo clearly states that the U.S. aims to lead, not just in AI capabilities, but also in the development of AI that's safe, secure, and trustworthy. And this brings us to another crucial point: the economic assessment of the U.S. private sector AI ecosystem. The National Economic Council will be tasked with this. But why is this economic angle so important in the context of national security?
Well, it's kind of like a national security SWOT analysis,
Yeah.
but for AI,
Right.
right? They're trying to understand the strength and weaknesses of the U.S. AI ecosystem. Where are we ahead? Where are we lagging behind? And that information is really crucial for making strategic decisions
Hmm.
about things like research priorities,
Mm.
investments, maybe even export
You
controls.
got it. It's about understanding where the U.S. stands in this global AI race
Hmm.
and what needs to be done to maintain a leadership position. Remember, AI is no longer just a technological issue. It's an economic and geopolitical issue as well.
Right. And this memo is a very clear signal that the U.S. government is taking all of those dimensions very seriously. They're not just talking about AI, they're taking concrete steps to shape its development and use in a way that benefits national security.
Mhm.
But leadership isn't just about being the biggest or the best. It's also about setting the standards, right?
Right.
And that leads us to the second major theme of this memo. But we'll get to that in just a moment.
Sounds good. We're going to delve into how the memo addresses those ethical considerations of AI and national security, and how the U.S. plans to really set a global example in this space.
So we've talked about this push for U.S. leadership in AI development.
Mhm.
But there's another really important side to this: responsible implementation. And that's where this memo gets into some really crucial ethical considerations.
Yeah, and they really emphasize how important this is, they say. The NSM does not simply demand that we use AI systems in service of the national security mission effectively. It also unequivocally states we must do so only in ways that align with democratic values. So they're making it very clear that being effective is not enough on its own.
Yeah, that quote really stood out to me as well. It seems like they're acknowledging the incredible potential of AI, but at the same time, they're saying, hold on, we need some guardrails here. It's not just about what we could do with AI, it's about what we should do.
Exactly. And to make sure those shoulds actually become real actions, they're introducing something called the Framework to Advance AI Governance and Risk Management in National Security.
Okay, so what does that actually mean? What does this framework entail?
Well, it really gets into the nuts and bolts of how government agencies will have to deal with AI. It's about managing risk. It's about conducting thorough evaluations of systems. It's about accountability for the people building and using AI. And it's about transparency, basically making sure that AI is used responsibly and ethically, especially in the context of national security.
So it's not just build the coolest, most powerful AI possible. It's build it in a way that we can understand, that we can control, and in a way that aligns with our values as a nation,
Right.
especially when you consider the impact this kind of tech can have on things like surveillance or intelligence gathering.
Exactly. And the memo gets very specific about some of the risks that agencies need to be paying attention to. And one that I think is really relevant for folks like you, AI engineers, is privacy.
Yeah. As these AI systems increasingly rely on just vast amounts of data, the potential for violating people's privacy is a huge concern. Think about things like facial recognition tech or AI systems that are analyzing social media data.
Absolutely. That's why the memo really stresses the need for strong data security measures, techniques that can preserve privacy while still using data, and very clear guidelines about who can access what and for what reasons.
So it's not just about protecting individual rights, it's also about making sure the public can still trust AI, especially when it's being used by the government.
Exactly. Another big risk that they highlight is safety and reliability, especially for AI systems that are used in critical infrastructure or even military applications.
Yeah, the stakes are incredibly high there.
Okay.
Just imagine what could happen if the AI controlling a power grid or even an autonomous weapons system suddenly malfunction.
Exactly. And that's why the memo calls for really rigorous testing and evaluation of these systems. It's not enough to just assume that the AI will figure everything out on its own. They're emphasizing the need for human oversight and control, especially for those really high-stakes applications.
So it's like they're trying to strike this balance between leveraging the power of AI while at the same time making sure that it's used safely and responsibly.
Precisely. They're recognizing that AI is a very powerful tool. But just like any tool, It can be used for good or for bad. It's about making sure that we're using it in a way that aligns with our values and then ultimately protects our interests.
Okay, so this framework that we've been talking about,
Yeah.
this is obviously going to have a pretty big impact on how AI is developed and deployed within the government. But what about the private sector? What kind of impact will this have on companies and researchers working on AI?
Well, the memo actually addresses that as well. They're calling for something they call streamlined procurement practices and easier ways for the government to collaborate with what they call non-traditional vendors, basically trying to make it easier for smaller companies, startups, even individual researchers to work with the government on AI projects.
Interesting. So they're saying the NSM direct changes across the board to make sure we are using AI systems effectively while adhering to our values. Among other actions, it directs agencies to propose streamlined procurement practices and ways to ease collaboration with non-traditional vendors.
Hmm. They're really trying to open the doors to a wider range of people contributing to the AI ecosystem.
Yeah, exactly. They're recognizing that innovation in AI isn't just happening in these big defense contractors. It's happening in startups, universities, even in open source communities.
This is where things get really interesting for a lot of people listening, I think. If the government's serious about collaborating with those non-traditional vendors, that opens up a lot of opportunities for people and companies working on AI who maybe hadn't even thought about working with the government before.
It's a big shift in mindset, and it really makes sense given how fast things are moving in the world of AI. The government just can't afford to rely on the same old players. They need to be more agile, more adaptable, and that means finding new sources of talent and ideas. So we've got these two big focuses so far. The U.S. wants to be a leader in AI development, but also a leader in responsible AI development.
Right.
For sort of setting the standards for how it should be used.
Right.
That's a big task. And it doesn't stop at the borders of the U.S., right? This is a global issue.
You're absolutely right. AI doesn't care about national borders. And that brings us to what I think is the most crucial part of this whole memo: international collaboration. They're essentially saying we can't do this alone.
So we've talked about these goals for U.S. leadership in AI and the approach to responsible development within the government. But like we were just saying, AI, it's a global thing, right? It's not limited by borders or
Right,
anything.
exactly. And that's why this third piece of the memo is so important, this idea of advancing international consensus on how we govern AI. They're saying, look, the U.S. can't just set the rules for the whole world,
Right.
but we can work with our allies, with our partners, to establish a shared vision for how AI is developed and used responsibly.
Yeah, it makes total sense. I mean, imagine if every country had completely different rules about AI. It'd be chaos. Like trying to build a global internet where every country is using a different protocol.
It just wouldn't work. And the memo is very clear. The U.S. sees international collaboration as absolutely key to getting this right.
Okay, so they're not just talking about it. What are they actually doing? What does this collaboration look like in practice?
Well, they highlight a bunch of initiatives that are already happening. Like there's the International Code of Conduct on AI, which they're developing with the G7 allies. And there have been some pretty big summits focused on AI safety, like the ones in Bletchley and Seoul.
So bringing the best minds together to at least start talking to these issues, that's a good first step.
Absolutely.
But what about the more difficult stuff, like reaching agreements on military applications of AI? That's got to be a minefield internationally.
Oh, it definitely is. But even there, the memo shows some progress. They point to the political declaration on the military use of AI and autonomy as one example. They're even working with the UN on a resolution specifically about AI. This isn't just talk, it's concrete action.
So I see a pattern here, right? Diplomacy, these big summits, and then actually working towards agreements and declarations, trying to build that framework from multiple angles. But honestly, are they being realistic? Getting global consensus on anything is hard enough, let alone something as complex as AI that's changing so rapidly.
It's a huge challenge, no doubt about it. The memo itself even says, the goal is this stable, responsible, and rights-respecting governance framework for AI, but it recognizes that different countries are going to have different values, different priorities. They're at different points in terms of technological development.
So how do you bridge those gaps? How do you get everybody on the same page when you're talking about something as powerful and potentially disruptive as AI?
That is the million-dollar question. It's going to take a lot of diplomacy, a lot of compromise, and honestly, a real willingness to listen to each other, to learn from different perspectives.
It's like we're all trying to write the rule book for this incredibly powerful technology all at the same time. Yeah. And we have to do it together, even though we don't all necessarily speak the same language, figuratively or literally.
Exactly. And that's why this memo, with this big focus on international collaboration, is so important. It recognizes that the future of AI is not something any one nation can control. It's got to be a shared effort.
Okay, so big picture, we've talked about these U.S. ambitions for leadership in AI, the need to develop it responsibly, both here and globally. What's the key takeaway for our listeners, especially those who are, down in the code doing the research and engineering work on AI?
The key takeaway is AI isn't just a tech problem anymore. It's tied up with national security, with global politics, with ethical questions that affect the entire world. And every single person building this technology is part of that conversation now.
It's like AI is graduating from the lab and having to learn how to be a good citizen on the world stage.
Exactly. And that means the work you're doing has implications way beyond the code itself. So stay informed about these policy discussions, get involved in the debates about ethics, and use your expertise to advocate for AI being developed responsibly. Your voices matter more than ever.
This memo is a real call to action for everyone in AI. The future of this tech is being shaped right now, and we all have a part in making sure it's a future we can be proud of. Until next time, keep diving deep.